Hello everyone, welcome, and to those returning viewers, welcome back to my mini-series on creative writing. Last time we looked at character designs. Today we're looking at how to construct a plot. If this sort of content interests you, consider liking and subscribing. I will say that for the topic of today's video, most of the advice given will be aimed towards fiction writing. So, in theory, you now have your characters. Let's begin crafting a compelling narrative. Hilariously, upon researching today's topic, the common advice that continued to pop up was that the author should write a compelling plot. This seemed to be a bit of a no shit Sherlock moment because I honestly don't think most people actually set out to write a boring or uninteresting story on purpose, but I digress. I think what they could be trying to say is that the first step in penning a novel is to generate a compelling idea. This could be sparked by brainstorming, free writing, or using writing prompts. The key is to explore various concepts and select a premise that can be an effective driving point for your plot. Once you have a core idea, the general advice from here is to expand it into a more detailed story premise. The more information, the better. Now, here I will leave another caution. This personally does not work for me. I found that going into too much detail was very difficult and I would spend an alarming amount of time staring at a Word document with only 1 or 2 words written on it. I'm very much someone who works best with a solid character design, a rough plot, a setting, and very little else. Be careful about becoming too fixated on drawing out your entire plot from start to finish. If this works for you, that's fantastic, but if you find yourself stalling or the plot is becoming too lifeless, try loosening that iron grip. Consider using the snowflake method. The snowflake method is essentially using the characters and basic themes as the center and slowly spindling out bits and pieces as they come to mind. A strong central conflict is essential to anchor your plot. Using a well-known story as an example, think of Harry Potter, where the ongoing battle between Harry and Voldemort provides a clear focus throughout the story. Look to thrillers, fantasy, or adventure stories for examples of well-defined good versus evil conflicts if this is the type of story you would like to write. Another simpler example would be The Girl on the Train, where solving the disappearance of Megan Hipwell is the driving point that the rest of the plot builds around. The structure of your novel is critical. The 3-act structure is the most common novel structure, but there are many others to explore. Understanding these structures can help you organize your plot and narrative. Begin by creating an outline for your general story arc. You don't need to create every detail at once. Try focusing on individual acts or scenes and gradually build up a comprehensive narrative. The more you jot down, the easier it can be to add depth and complexity later. You can add a few ideas for subplots. These can be character-driven, providing opportunities to explore their backstories and motivations. Effective subplots should seamlessly integrate with the main plot, enhancing the action rather than distracting from it. A well-crafted story requires a logical sequence of events. Each scene should be motivated by previous events, creating a dynamic and engaging narrative. Ensure that your plot progresses naturally due to character motivation and actions. Let's look at that outline again. Try to identify the inciting incident, arising action or actions, and the start of the climax and how it ends. As you write, be mindful of tying up loose ends and addressing any plot holes.
Not potholes, plot holes. They're inconsistencies that can destroy a good adventure. Ow!
Come on, dude. Plot holes aren't that big a deal. Tons of great movies have them.
Yeah, like in Lord of the Rings. They could have just flown those giant eagles to Mount Doom instead of walking there.
Or in Armageddon, they taught drillers to become astronauts when it would have been way easier to teach astronauts to drill.
This is where having a second pair of eyes can really help. I cannot even tell you how many times some sort of mistake or plot hole was prevented because one of my readers made a comment on an uploaded chapter. Editing is a crucial part of the writing process. Whilst it's often seen as a final step, I really do believe that editing should be incorporated throughout your writing journey. A very sharp side note here is that this is not an excuse to go off the rails and edit every scrap of writing to perfection. This is a trap and it will prevent you from finishing your work. What I mean is that just a second pair of eyes or another look over so that you can hear that little voice inside your head that says, "Hey dude, wasn't that character in a completely different time zone 5 pages ago?" Or, "Hey man, I'm fairly sure you gave that side character a completely different surname." That is a mistake that I have made before with some of my larger books. Character development is equally important to plot, as we've previously covered. Throughout the plot, you want to develop their unique perspectives and ensure that they are realistic and engaging. Another piece of general advice is to create well-rounded characters with details on clear motivations and backstories. As a personal side note, I'd just like to reiterate that not every part of your character needs to be spelled out. Some of the most interesting characters are the ones that we don't know everything about. People love a good morally ambiguous character, whether they be villain, ally, or protagonist. Those grey areas can be what hooks the readers in. Yes, eventually you may want to start revealing those details to your audience, but I have sometimes found that a character evolves with the story, and they don't always end up the way I had first drafted. I don't think this is a negative thing at all. If the character is evolving and it works well with the plot, go with it. Something I didn't see come up with quite a few of these articles I read on this topic was addressing what perspective your novel is written in, first, second, or third. First-person perspective is when the story is being told from the perspective of the character within the narrative. The pronouns used are I and me. For example, I woke up to the sounds of birds chirping outside my window. The sun was shining bright, casting a warm glow on the room. Second-person perspective is when the story is told directly to the reader, addressing the reader using the pronoun you. Second person is often used in instructional manuals or interactive fiction or fan fiction, but it's less common in novels. For example, you wake up to the sound of birds chirping outside your window. The sun is shining bright, casting a warm glow on the room. Third-person perspective is when the story is told from the outside, using pronouns like he, she, it, or they. Third person can even be divided further into omniscient. The narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of the characters, such in Pride and Prejudice. Limited omniscience. The narrator knows the thoughts and feelings of one or a few of the characters, such as The Great Gatsby. Or objective. The narrator only reports what is seen or heard without revealing the character's inner thoughts and feelings. Choosing the right perspective is crucial. The choice of perspective significantly impacts the reader's experience. First person allows more intimate and personal views, allowing the reader to connect deeply with the narrator's thoughts and feelings. Second person can create a sense of intimacy and involvement, directly addressing the reader. Third person provides a more objective view, allowing the narrator to present multiple perspectives and offer commentary. Ultimately, the best perspective for a story depends on the author's goals and the nature of the narrative. Consider the level of intimacy you want to create with the reader, the complexity of the character's thoughts and feelings, and the overall tone and style of your story. It's also about what you personally feel comfortable writing. I could easily go into more depth onto this topic, especially when it comes to book-to-film adaptations. One of the reasons an adaptation can fail is because a book was constructed in first person, but brought to the screen in third person, and the loss of those innermost thoughts can have a startling impact on how the events of the story are perceived by the audience. For another small personal note, I really struggle writing books from a first-person perspective. I'm not actually quite sure why, but I find that it just doesn't flow as easily. I also really struggle to read books told from the second perspective if the material is for a fictional novel rather than an instruction manual. I often find myself cringing and really unable to engage with the story. I would suggest that you have a play around, experiment, and see what feels comfortable for you. I hope you've enjoyed this short look into what is a very broad topic. For the next part of this mini-series, I'm going to be looking into common stereotypes in fictional writing and the pros and cons of what they can add or take away from your work. Thanks for sticking around. Until next time.